The night Tupac died has been explained so many times that it feels settled. A fight, a red light, a gun. A clean story wrapped around a messy moment. But when you slow it down, that story locks into place a little too easily. For a death this big, involving money, power, and people who knew how to move quietly, the explanation arrived almost finished. What you're about to hear isn't built on shock or rumor. It's built on timing, access, incentives, and patterns that repeat when powerful systems protect themselves. A life built around symbols. Tupac's story began with meaning attached to him before he had a voice. His name carried history. His family carried ideology. His earliest environment was shaped by political pressure, surveillance, and struggle. That context didn't turn him into an icon by itself, but it placed him inside a world where symbols mattered. His mother's involvement with the Black Panther Party wasn't a footnote. It shaped how Tupac understood power, resistance, and language. He grew up hearing about systems, not accidents, about forces, not luck. That kind of upbringing trains a person to look past surface explanations. It also trains the people watching him to see more than just entertainment when he speaks. As he grew, Tupac leaned into language early. Poetry came before rap. Expression came before image. He talked about pain, loyalty, death, and legacy with a clarity that felt ahead of his age. Interviews from his teens already show someone thinking about how lives end and how stories survive afterward. That doesn't mean he expected to die young. It means he understood that voices like his don't exist in a vacuum. Pay attention to how often Tupac framed life as a struggle with consequences. He spoke about sacrifice. He spoke about being targeted. He spoke about forces bigger than individual beefs. These weren't dramatic lines for attention. They were consistent themes across years. When someone talks like that long enough, people start treating them as a symbol, whether they want to be or not. Symbols attract pressure. They attract followers, critics, and enemies all at once. Tupac's reach crossed boundaries. He spoke to people in the streets and people in classrooms. He challenged authority while selling records. That combination made him unpredictable. Unpredictable figures unsettle systems built on control. This matters because symbolic figures don't get removed quietly. Their presence disrupts balance. That's why his conflicts never stayed small. Disagreements became statements. Rivalries became representations of entire coasts, industries, and identities. Even when he tried to move personally, the symbol followed him. By the mid-1990s, Tupac was carrying meaning whether he chose to or not. Understanding that helps explain why theories about ritual, symbolism, and messaging attach themselves to his death. People don't look for deeper meaning when a random person is killed. They do when a symbol disappears. Especially when that disappearance happens in public, under bright lights, and with an explanation that feels too neat. The industry is not just business. When people talk about the music industry, they usually talk about charts, contracts, and money. That's the surface layer. Underneath that is a system built on access and control. Power doesn't sit with the loudest artist or the biggest hit. It moves quietly through executives, financiers, promoters, lawyers, and fixers who never touch a microphone. These are the people who decide who gets pushed, who gets paused, and who gets buried under paperwork until momentum dies. Contracts lock artists into long-term dependence. Advances create debt that never fully clears. Media relationships shape public perception. Legal pressure keeps people distracted. Loyalty is rewarded. Dissent becomes expensive. None of this needs to be announced. It's understood by anyone who's been around long enough. Some artists fit into this structure easily. They play their role, follow guidance, and keep conflict private. Others don't. Tupac never did. He spoke openly about exploitation, ownership, and power while still operating inside the system that made him unpredictable. Predictability is valuable to industries. It allows planning. It allows risk management. Unpredictable voices disrupt that balance. Tupac didn't separate art from politics or business from identity. His interviews carried the same intensity as his music. He questioned who owned culture, who profited from pain, and who decided what voices were amplified. That kind of talk travels beyond fan bases. It reaches people who don't usually listen to rap. It also reaches people who prefer artists to stay focused on entertainment. In systems like this, disruption is managed over time. First comes pressure. Meetings get tense. Support gets conditional. Then, isolation begins. Access shrinks. Relationships cool off. If that fails, legal trouble appears. Court dates steal time. Public narratives shift. The artist becomes framed as unstable or difficult. None of these steps require a single villain. They happen because the system rewards behavior that protects itself. Tupac's volatility mattered here. Not because it made him wrong, but because it made him harder to steer. He reacted emotionally. He spoke impulsively. He trusted quickly and broke trust loudly. From a business perspective, that's a liability. Not because of morality, but because it creates risk. Risk attracts attention. Attention threatens control. This is why silence is valuable in powerful spaces. Silence keeps deals intact. Silence keeps narratives clean. Silence keeps everyone safe. Tupac didn't offer silence. He offered intensity. That intensity brought loyalty from fans and anxiety from executives. Once someone reaches a point where their influence outweighs their manageability, the system starts looking for ways to shrink that influence. That doesn't mean there's a single meeting where someone decides a fate. Systems don't work that way. They apply pressure until outcomes become possible. They create environments where problems solve themselves. When chaos surrounds a person long enough, people stop asking who benefits and start asking who messed up. By the mid-1990s, Tupac wasn't operating as a normal artist anymore. His reach crossed music, politics, culture, and identity. He could move crowds with a verse or an interview. That kind of reach challenges any structure built on quiet control. When an artist grows larger than the system designed to contain them, the system has to respond somehow. Friendship, access, A&D, the first breach. Before the rivalry headlines and diss tracks, there were friendships. Real ones. Tupac's early connection with Biggie wasn't staged for cameras. It formed through shared backgrounds, mutual respect, and time spent together without agendas. They talked music, technique, life, and ambition. Tupac opened his space. Biggie stayed in his apartment. They moved through the same rooms, the same studios, the same social circles. That level of access mattered. In the music world, proximity is currency. Who you sit next to. Who hears your unfiltered thoughts? Who knows your schedule before it's public? Tupac treated them as human connections. That openness built trust. It also created exposure. Being close to Biggie meant being close to Bad Boy's inner orbit. It meant being around executives, producers, and people whose interests didn't always align with Tupac's. Information flows casually in those spaces. Comments get overheard. Plans get mentioned. Movements become predictable. No one needs to be spying for that to happen. It's the natural result of closeness. Trust changes how people move. Tupac traveled without paranoia around people he believed were solid. He didn't hide his location. He didn't compartmentalize conversations. That made life easier. It also lowered defenses. When professional and personal lines blur, boundaries weaken. That's where breaches begin. The first real breach didn't happen in Las Vegas. It happened in New York. Quad Studios. Tupac arrived expecting a recording session. He left shot, robbed, and humiliated. The attackers knew where he would be. They knew the timing. They knew he wouldn't arrive guarded like he would later. That knowledge didn't come from the street alone. Surviving that attack changed everything. Tupac processed it as betrayal. From his perspective, the attack could not have happened without inside awareness. The phone calls earlier that day, the invitations, the casual certainty that he would show up. Those details mattered to him more than police explanations. After Quad Studios, Tupac stopped believing in accidents. He started seeing patterns where others saw chaos. Trust narrowed, anger sharpened, loyalty became absolute or non-existent. That shift shaped every decision that followed. It also pushed him closer to people who promised protection over diplomacy. Psychologically, surviving an ambush does something lasting. It rewires how risk is perceived. Tupac didn't just feel threatened, he felt hunted. When someone reaches that mindset, every move becomes reactive. Every slight becomes evidence. That makes them easier to provoke and harder to calm. The industry noticed the change. Relationships cooled. Communication stiffened. What once felt like friendship now felt like positioning. From Tupac's side, the line had been crossed. The breach wasn't repairable. Once trust collapses at that level, the fallout spreads quickly. And once that belief disappears, everything escalates faster than anyone expects. Control through chaos. When Tupac went to prison, everything around him sped up at the same time. Legal pressure tightened. Media coverage grew louder. Industry rivalries became daily headlines. From the outside, it looked like disorder. Inside the system, disorder can be useful. Chaos hides structure. When too many fires burn at once, it becomes hard to see who lit which match. Prison removed Tupac from direct movement, but it didn't remove his influence. His music kept charting. His name stayed in headlines. That created tension. Power structures prefer problems that stay quiet. Tupac's presence stayed loud even behind bars. While he was locked away, narratives formed around him without his input. Court dates defined his image. Headlines reduced him to charges and controversy. That framing stuck. When he aligned with Death Row Records after his release, the volume increased again. Death Row wasn't subtle. Its leadership leaned into intimidation, visibility, and dominance. That style clashed with quieter forms of power operating elsewhere in the industry. Rivalry became spectacle. Every move became public. Interviews turned hostile. Diss tracks traveled faster than facts. This noise did something important. It pulled attention toward the loudest figures. Tupac's anger, his interviews, his confrontations became the story. That spotlight stayed fixed on him. Meanwhile, decisions made in private rooms didn't attract the same focus. Chaos creates cover by overwhelming attention. Public feuds helped frame everything as emotional. Anger, ego, pride. When violence later appeared, it fit the narrative already in place. People didn't ask how, they asked why, and the why seemed obvious because it had been rehearsed in public for months. That's how chaos works. It trains people to expect a certain outcome. Behind this noise were intermediaries, people who connect worlds. They pass messages. They arrange introductions. They smooth tensions while quietly shaping outcomes. They don't give direct orders. They create conditions. When violence happens, they stay untouched because nothing points directly at them. Plausible deniability depends on distance. The further the decision sits from the action, the safer it becomes. Systems that rely on intermediaries never need to say the dangerous part out loud. Everyone involved understands the direction without instructions. When something goes wrong, it looks organic. Tupac's visibility made him the obvious center of every conflict. That visibility also made him easier to isolate. As the focus stayed on him, others stayed off camera. By the time he was free again, the environment around him had shifted. Alliances had hardened. Expectations had formed. Certain outcomes felt inevitable. Chaos didn't cause what came next by itself. It prepared the ground. It made later events feel natural instead of planned. When the board looks scrambled, moves go unnoticed. And once enough pieces are in place, no single moment feels decisive. The final night, reconstructed. September 7th didn't feel dangerous at first. It felt busy, plans stacked on top of plans. The Tyson fight, the crowd, the movement from one place to another. That's how nights like this usually begin. The first decision point came early at the MGM Grand. The encounter in the lobby didn't appear planned in the moment. A familiar face, a rush of adrenaline, people stepping forward instead of back. Security cameras caught what happened. That footage later did a lot of work for the official story. It gave a motive everyone could recognize. Retaliation sounds simple. Simple motives travel fast. After the lobby, the night could have gone in several directions. One option was to leave immediately and head to the club with security tight and timing predictable. That didn't happen. Another decision followed. A delay. A choice to move elsewhere first. These choices didn't look dangerous on their own. They looked casual, familiar, comfortable. The stop to change clothes mattered. It changed timing. It changed routes. It changed who was nearby. Security that would normally stay close didn't follow in the same way. Protection doesn't disappear in one move. It thins. A person becomes reachable in stages. That's what happened here. Each step looked reasonable. None of them raised alarms by themselves. Together they created space. Space is what makes events possible. When space opens at the right moment, outcomes feel sudden even when they aren't. By the time the car left for the club, the conditions had shifted. Night traffic, open windows, a familiar route. The intersection at Flamingo and Koval didn't carry meaning until it did. Red lights don't warn people, they pause them. The shooting happened fast. A white Cadillac. Shots fired. A clinical sequence. No extended chase. No spectacle. The violence itself didn't last long enough to explain everything that came before it. That's why focusing on the shooting alone never answers the larger question. Emergency response followed. Hospital transport. Statements. Within hours, the explanation solidified. The earlier fight became the anchor. The retaliation narrative fit cleanly. The sequence of decisions that opened the window faded into the background. What stands out isn't how the night ended, it's how quickly the ending made sense to everyone who needed it to. The system didn't pause, there was no visible confusion. Business moved forward. Media adjusted. Labels recalibrated. Schedules changed. That speed matters. When something unexpected happens, systems stumble. When something anticipated happens, systems absorb it. By the next morning, the story was already stable. Tupac's presence was gone. The industry didn't fracture, it rebalanced. And that leads to the final question. What does a system gain when a figure like this disappears? To answer that, the focus has to move beyond the night itself and toward what followed, what his death made possible. After Tupac died, the industry didn't stop. It reorganized. Power shifted quietly. Certain conflicts cooled, others vanished entirely. Conversations that once felt urgent lost momentum. Artists recalculated what could be said and how loudly. The absence created space. Space for safer voices. Space for cleaner images. Space for fewer complications. A figure who challenged ownership, control, and narrative no longer occupied the center. That alone changed the temperature. Some benefited from stability. Some benefited from silence. Some benefited from the removal of a variable they couldn't manage. This isn't about guilt, it's about outcome. Systems don't need villains to benefit from loss. They only need the loss itself. The case refuses to disappear because the explanation never matched the impact. When someone with that level of influence vanishes, people expect disruption. Instead, the machine kept running. That disconnect keeps questions alive. Over time, testimony surfaced. Confessions shifted. Documentaries reframed timelines. Each new piece didn't close the story, it added weight. Unanswered questions don't resolve on their own, they accumulate. That's why the ritual idea lingers. Not because people want drama, but because the removal carried meaning. Whether planned symbolically or absorbed symbolically, the effect was the same. A threat was removed. Balance returned. Until the full truth is acknowledged, every new detail will feel unsettling. Not because it proves one theory, but because it exposes how fragile the original story always was. And stories built on fragile ground crack easily. That's where this ends. Not with certainty, with awareness. Because once you see how the night unfolded, how the system responded, and who moved forward untouched, the question stops being about what happened. It becomes about what was allowed to happen next.